Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to February's Sustainability Chat, brought to you by the Sustainability Institute here in La Crosse, Wisconsin. My name is Casey Meehan. I help direct the programming here at the Sustainability Institute. And if you're not familiar at all with what we do here and our mission, we are a not-for-profit based in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and our mission is to promote a positive vision of what sustainability looks like in the Driftless region and celebrate really the efforts that are underway. So this month, we're here highlighting Transit Equity Week by speaking with some local public transportation experts. So if you've never been to one of our chats before, couple of logistics here before we get going. First of all, please keep your microphones and your cameras off just to preserve our internet stream. Typically, we'll have a 20 to 30 minute presentation or so by our guests, and then we'll have some time to field some questions from you, the audience. So we'll be monitoring the chat box. What we'll do is we'll do a Q&A session at the end here. So any questions that you have, type them into the chat box, or any concerns that you have, type them into that box as well. We'll be monitoring that. It's probably located at the bottom of your screen, the little bubble that says chat. If you click on that, you'll be able to then enter text into that. Right now, though, before we get going, there's going to be a quick poll here. We're just curious to have you answer a couple of questions about transit here. So you'll see a poll with a couple of questions on your screen right now. If you could take just 30 seconds or so and answer those questions. All right, great. And it looks like about 2/3 of folks on here are have used public transit. And about 2/3 also plan to attend some of the other Transit Equity Week programs, which is great. We'll offer a link to you, excuse me, later on in the chat here that can get you to all the different events that are going on for Transit Equity Week here in the La Crosse area. So thank you for taking that poll. Our work at the Sustainability Institute is guided by the UN Global Goals. This is a set of 17 interconnected goals that work on sustainability, and it's really holistic, thinking about what sustainability is. Right? It's not just about the environment. There's some social aspects to it as well. February 4th is Transit Equity Day. And Rosa Parks' birthday. So Rosa Parks, if you're not familiar with her, was a Black American civil rights activist who played a pivotal role in the civil rights movement by now famously refusing to give up her bus seat to a white rider during the Montgomery, Alabama bus boycott in 1955. And for the last couple of years now, there's been this movement called the Transit Equity Movement. And transit equity advocates for everyone's rights to an equitable public mass transit system. And that includes a safe, reliable, environmentally sustainable, and affordable transit that's accessible to everybody. You might ask, well, okay, why do we need a strong public transit system? Well, the Wisconsin Department of Transportation estimates that about 10 to 20% of La Crosse County residents older than 15 are non-drivers. And in the city of La Crosse, that number goes up. 30 to 40% of residents in the city of La Crosse older than 15 are non-drivers. Now, there's all sorts of reasons why they might be non-drivers, right? But one of them is that the average annual cost to own and operate a car is nearly $11,000. So that's a hefty lift, right, for lots of people. So just owning a car is sometimes unattainable, and so people need to rely on public transit. Wisconsin residents who do take public transit spend about an extra 62% of their time commuting. So this comes at a premium, right, for people who can't drive or don't drive, choose not to drive. And of course, non-white households. So this impacts traditionally marginalized groups much more than others. Non-white households are almost 6 times more likely to commute via public transportation. So having a strong public transit system is an issue of fairness, but it's also a climate issue. In fact, carbon pollution from the transportation sector is the highest of any sector in the US. About 27% of our total carbon pollution emissions come from transportation, and carbon pollution from passenger cars and trucks makes up more than half of that. A ride, however, on public transit emits 55% less carbon pollution than driving alone does. Now, public transit in the US in 2018, is the most recent numbers I could find, saved 63 million cubic tons of carbon pollution from going into the atmosphere. That's amazing. That's like the same as taking 16 coal-fired power plants offline for a year. So, you know, this is a climate issue. This is an equity issue. It's also a livability issue. Imagine for a second if we didn't need to rely on a single mode of transportation to move us around. So think of how much more freedom we would feel if we had an abundance of safe and convenient ways to move us from point A to point B. We could walk, we could bike, we could bus, you know, maybe light rail, trains, or yes, of course, the car. So there's all sorts of reasons why transit equity is important. And it's something that we need to be advocating for. Here to talk to us today about Transit Equity Week and how La Crosse is trying to address equity through public transit are Peter Fletcher, who's the Executive Director of the La Crosse Area Planning Committee, and Adam Lorentz, who's the City of La Crosse Director of Transit. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Peter Fletcher, and he'll tell us a little bit about where the La Crosse Area Planning Committee is with transit equity, and then we'll transition over to Adam. Again, please, if you've got questions, type them into those chat box, and we will get to those at the end of our session here together. So, Peter, thank you for joining us, and take it away.
Okay, well, thank you, and hello everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. As mentioned, I'm the director of the Metropolitan Planning Organization for La Crescent area, and a part of what we do is we work with public transportation providers such as a Smart Bus, MTU, and shared ride services, and we provide some technical and planning assistance. Previously, I worked with the Mississippi River Regional Planning Commission for about 15 years. And I was involved in the development, ultimately the start of the Smart Bus that time. That was a regional planning organization based in La Crosse. I'll go to the next slide. I'll first talk about the Smart Bus, which around 13 years ago, about this time of year, was brought up as an idea at a Crawford County transportation meeting. I'll then talk a bit about the shared ride public transportation systems that are operated in our area communities, such as Onalaska, Holmen, West Salem, Tomah, Westby, Baroqua, and Prairie du Chien. I'll go next slide. But first, I'll talk about the Smart Bus, what it is, how it is funded, who rides it, and what are its benefits. In answering these questions, I'll also tell you a little bit about how the bus service was started, as it is kind of unique, as it is one of the few such rural services in the state. Next slide. So what is a Smart Bus? It's a fixed route weekday commuter service. It's Monday through Friday, and it's on scheduled routes and stops. It serves La Crosse, Vernon, Monroe, and Crawford counties. When it originally started, it just did not serve Monroe County. Today, however, it always goes through 14 communities throughout our region. Obviously, La Crosse is a major hub, and the destinations that it serves stops in La Crosse are UWL, the Turbo, WTC, Mayo, Gunderson Health, and downtown La Crosse. Primarily, there's 4 buses, the service, and they each have 26 passengers. They're wheelchair accessible. We've had Wi-Fi on the bus since day one, bike racks. There's also flag stops that are available, and those are available. What are flag stops? They're available to people primarily in the rural areas, not in the urban areas, but in the rural areas. If you happen to live along a smart bus route and it goes by your home, you can go as long as it's safe spot. You can flag down the driver. They'll stop. You have to pay your fee, and they'll pull over, pick you up, and drop you back off. It is at driver discretion as far as safety. There's also reduced fares and free ride programs for the bus itself. And we try to maintain a low one-way fare of $3. That has been since it began as well. Next slide. As far as the routes, as I mentioned, there's 4 main routes, and there's referred to as by the colors by the buses. There's a blue bus, a yellow bus, a red bus, and a green bus. The blue bus serves Viroqua, West Picoon Valley, La Crosse, and runs between around 5:30 or so in the morning to 7 o'clock at night. The yellow bus serves those same communities, but offers service between around 6:25 to 5:40. The red bus is a bus that travels between Prairie du Chien and La Crosse, serving Lynxville, Ferryville, DeSoto, Genoa, and Stoddard. And that goes 3 round trips per day. And that goes between around 6 in the morning to a little after 6 in the evening. Then the green route, which connects Tomah, Sparta, West Salem, Onalaska, and La Crosse. This is the service that began around 2019. It also has 3 runs at around 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Daily. And next slide. I'm going to spend a little time on this slide. I'm going to talk to you a little bit how SMART started. In 2010, the city of Prairie du Chien contacted Crawford County with a concept of commuter bus service to La Crosse. Actually, that contact was a meeting of the Crawford County Transportation Committee, and I happened to be at that meeting. The planner at that time, which I didn't know, but is Garth Faber from the city of Prairie du Chien, came to the meeting and brought up the idea of a commuter bus that connected Prairie du Chien to La Crosse. Simply, there were jobs available by employers in Prairie du Chien, and they were having trouble getting workers. So they were looking for a way to try to get more workers. Based on that meeting and the concept of commuter bus, La Crosse, Vernon, and Crawford County transportation agencies met jointly. And at that time, an oversight committee was formed to explore the concept of a commuter bus. And that group met, and it was determined that such a service was needed. And one thing, though, it had to encompass a larger area, involve more communities. It should focus on getting people to and from work. Also to focus on getting elderly, disabled residents to medical appointments and shopping. And a vital part of it would be to assist in connecting communities and residents socially, economically in our area. At that time, the city of Prairie du Chien offered matching funds as well as Crawford County for a grant to conduct a feasibility study. So that was critical in the beginning stages in 2010. Also, just go back to a little bit further, just talk about a little bit, explain that a little bit about the oversight committee. That committee consisted of a couple planners, and that would have been myself and the Garth Faber from the city of Prairie du Chien. We had aging unit directors at that time, which are now mainly the ADRC directors and nonprofit representatives. We did have on that committee some technical assistance from WISTOD. The interesting thing about the committee, none of us had experience or knowledge or understanding of starting or operating a regional bus service. Quite frankly, because we were kind of naive, might have been one of the reasons why we were able to start. Because I think if we knew what we were getting ourselves into at that time, a couple of us might have just taken a pass, but we moved ahead. Now that committee exists today. At least one representative from each county sits on it and meets regularly to make decisions regarding how the Smart Bus operates it. I'm still on that committee along with the Garth, the planner for Prairie. We are the only 2 original members left still going on that committee. So that background, that feasibility study that I mentioned was completed in 2010. And I'm going to spare the details about what transpired between the feasibility study being completed and the actual start of the Smart Bus service in December of 2012. That itself is a couple-hour discussion. But SMART started in December 2012. And if you've heard of soft starts for openings, well, when we started SMART, we had quite frankly, a secret opening. We just had the buses ran. We were very unsure about the route times. Middle of winter, 120-mile round trip routes going through these communities, and we weren't really sure how it would run. But after a couple of days, we actually figured out our planning had worked out pretty good. We began to slowly leak the word out that there was this bus service. We ended up giving 91 rides the first month. So in a nutshell for you, that's sort of how SMART started. Today, the service is sponsored by La Crosse County as the current sponsor of the Smart Bus program. You want to go to the next slide? I can tell you about how is Smart Bus funded. And there's really three components to the funding. Around 55% of the funds are state and federal grants are received annually. When SmartBus first started, we were able to take advantage of a program that provided 80% of funding for the first year and a half of the service. But now it's transitioned, it's around 55% of state and federal funds. Then there's another piece of that pie, a funding pie, is the fare box revenue that we receive for the service. In general, we're looking at 15%, but that does vary from year to year. And whatever's left over between that fare box and the federal and state funds is required that we have to come up with the local match. And that's the critical component to the Smart Bus and some of these other public transportation systems that are funding is coming up with that local match. Want to go to the next slide? SMART is somewhat unique in how that local match has been provided over the years. This is, in a lot of times, it's just a municipality sponsoring a service, and they come up with the funding through maybe some different means. As I mentioned, La Crosse County is the current sponsor of the service, but we worked with them since 2011. These are the communities that we've worked with each year to annually get sponsorship for the Smart Bus. As you see, a lot of the communities that we serve, some of the dollar amounts and things have changed over the years. You know, it's been a constant a battle to get the funding, and we've said business sponsors as well provide funding as for the Smart Bus. We've developed great relationships with our healthcare providers. You know, there's one of the greatest benefits of the service is to some of their workers and patients. But so this is you know, the key point of getting that local funding. We have a vast variety of people that we address and reach out to. Next slide. One other key thing to SMART over the years is we have developed partnerships just because of, you know, how tight the transportation budget has been. So we've been trying to key in some of the partnerships we've developed. We have a bus that originates in Toma each day. We needed a bus storage. We were able to get that from the VA. They provide that for us, which is great. La Crosse MTU has shared their bus stops and shelters in La Crosse since the beginning, and that has been a great relationship as well. And again, these are just no-cost services that we've received. VMH, Mayo, and Gunderson Health we have programs for riders and employees. Since the beginning, we've had WTC ride program for students and faculty. And one of the other SMART partnerships that we had, like I said, there have been many more, but the Opportunity Center in Prairie du Chien, actually, when we began in 2019, added the Toma, the Monroe County route. We didn't have a bus. And for the first 3 months, they provided a bus to us at no cost. We just had to put fuel in it and maintain it until we had a bus that we were able to purchase. And they provided that to got that service going. So those are kind of the new things and partnerships that we've developed over the years. Next. So, you know, who rides SMART? Annually, we do a survey of our riders, and over the years, we have a pretty good idea who is riding. You know, 40 to 50% of our riders are 45 to 65 years old. 10% are over 65 years of old. Depends on the year, but 50 to 60% are using it for commuting to and from work. 20% are commuting to or from school, whether it be in that case of TC, UWL, or Viterbo. 10 to 15% are traveling to medical appointments and also other appointments and things. One thing that is, we always ask, are you satisfied or very satisfied or dissatisfied with the service? And over the years, we've never had a score lower than 97% as far as, you know, are you satisfied or very satisfied with the service? And I might wonder how is that possible? And one thing that is, you know, people recognize that they have something special that many others don't, as far as a rural transportation system. And so believe me, I know they cut us some slack on some of the issues, but they're fortunate because, for example, you know, Coon Valley or Stoddard communities of 9,000 people, they have access to a daily bus service that provides connections to La Crosse and many other communities daily. And people are just happy that they have that because they know that that is not very commonplace in other communities their size. Next slide. What are the benefits of SMART? It's it's affordable transportation, low fares. We try to keep that at $3 a trip. That sort of addresses equity as we try to keep it available for everyone that needs it. And that that does include transfers as well. We also provide service to obviously medical facilities and appointments. The buses are wheelchair accessible, bike racks. And one of the key things, and I think that connects these rural communities to each other and La Crosse, that is always one of the key things that we've want people to recognize. There's just having that connection, regardless of how much ridership we get from each of those communities, they are connected. And that's important. We're also environmental friendly, obviously, public transportation. We ourselves been since 2020 have been we have the 2 electric buses and we're still waiting for delivery. Maybe the first year it might have been our fault with getting some of the funding in order, but in the last 2 or 3 years, we've been patiently waiting for 2 electric buses, which we will begin to incorporate on our routes. So we'll certainly make the service more even more environmentally friendly. Next slide. So that's a little bit of SMART. I'm now just going to take a final few minutes here, and I'll talk to you about the shared ride taxis that are available in several of our communities in the region. As I mentioned, Onalaska, Holmen, West Salem, Toma, Westby, Roquo, and Prairie du Chien are served by shared ride services. Next slide. So what is a shared ride taxi? I'm just going to give you a quick definition. A shared ride transportation provides requested trips to one or more passengers traveling between different origins or destinations and in the same general direction. Essentially, this is a taxi service that for those of you that are not aware of it, and they're open to the public. They provide a door-to-door service. They're reservation based. In other words, it's probably best if you call if you know you're going to need a ride. In these communities, you call and set up a time. But however, if you just determine that you're just sitting at home and you need to go someplace, you can call and they might tell you, well, we're busy right now. We can pick you up at such a time. But sometimes if it's a downtime, they can come immediately and they'll take you to your destination. Now, these operate 7 days a week in the communities where they're located. The service areas vary a little bit for primarily in the municipal boundaries. If you look at Onalaska, Holmen, and West Salem Shared Ride, they'll provide transportation service within their municipal boundaries of those communities. Westby and Roquo, they extend a mile outside their municipal boundaries. They will provide service, and they do have a fee for a trip between the 2 communities for a flat fee. Coulee Cab and Prairie du Chien, they'll extend service 2 miles outside the boundaries, and the Toma Transit, located obviously in Monroe County and Toma, they go out to 10 miles outside of their area, which is kind of rare for a shared ride service. The fares range from $275 to $450 per trip, depending on these various service and discounts. There are discounts for seniors. These are funded through a couple of different programs. The urban areas for like Onalaska are funded through a 5307 federal program, while the rural systems are funded through 5311 primarily. The next slide. I'm going to tell you again, the funding, how are these funded? It's sort of those same pieces to the pie that we talked about with the Smart Bus. And this is generalized for these shared rides in general, just to give you an idea, but around 54% comes from state and federal funds. The fare box, that varies probably between around 22% and 24%. That's not to say some services might be at 20 and 26, but they do ballpark figures. This is sort of where they fall as far as that fare box revenue and then those local matching funds that are needed to come up by the community. Next slide. So who's riding the shared ride service? I don't have data or survey information, just on experience, what I've seen and just working with these services. A great service for elderly and disabled residents, students as well, and especially in these smaller communities. If you go outside some of these schools, whether it be in Roquo or Westby, if you go up the pickup drop-off times, you're going to see these transit vehicles there bringing the children to the facilities. it's important to remember that too, the public, anybody can ride to utilize the services. There are also low-income individuals and non-drivers are greatly served by these services as well. Next slide. What are the benefits? The biggest benefit to the shared ride is the door-to-door service. That's why it's key in all these rural areas, especially for the elderly and disabled, which have a lot of the ridership comes from. And also a lot of in these communities, there's care facilities, assisted living centers where people don't have vehicles. And it's still a way for people to experience those communities and live in those communities. If you go to a Walmart or a grocery store in any of these communities or the medical facilities, you're going to see these public transit shared ride cabs. Those are the places you see them. These shared ride services offers transportation options in these rural communities that they can't afford a fixed route service, say like La Crosse. But so without these services, there would not be transportation. So they do serve a vital role as far as a benefit. The next slide with that, thank you. Hopefully I provided some useful information for everyone and give you a little insight. And after that, I'll be glad to answer questions at the end. Thank you.
Peter, thank you very much. And we do have some questions rolling in here, so stand by. And we're going to switch it over here to Adam Lorenz, who's the Director of Transit for the City of La Crosse. So Adam, take it away. Welcome.
All right, thank you. Hello, everyone. Can't really see anybody, so it looks like I'm talking to myself, but I'm used to that, so we'll be okay. So it's tough to follow up Peter because he's obviously got a wealth of knowledge and great information on those slides. So I'm just going to talk a little bit so we can leave some time for questions. But for the two kind of key points I'm going to focus on today is obviously sustainability. That's why we're here, and also equity. So the easy one to talk about for sustainability is obviously our electric buses, and that's kind of been the our main talking point. We talk about sustainability is how can we reduce the emissions that our vehicles are putting out. And more so than just talking about electric buses, I want to kind of give a little background on what it takes to get buses in service like that. I've actually been fortunate enough to speak to many different transit agencies across the country in regards to this. And the reason for that is that we're not the first to have electric buses, but we are one of the first to have electric buses of the service our size. So if you compare it to Madison, Milwaukee in our state, or obviously around the country, the San Diego's, the Minneapolises, the Austin, Texases, they have electric buses, but they're obviously a much larger fleet and differently funded. So I want to kind of just walk you through the process so you know what it takes to get these buses and what our plans are for the future and how do we plan for that. So this process started in 2018. It was actually a grant, a low and no emissions grant that was written by my predecessor. And we didn't get these buses in service till 2022. So you can tell that it was a longer process than our normal bus purchases, but that came up for a few reasons. One, like Peter mentioned, it's difficult to get things in right now. There's a lot of shortage in the supply chain right now. So, a normal bus is taking longer to get. But also, we really wanted to take our time with this project. Me walking into it from the ground zero just after the grant was approved, I had to wrap my head around it. There's the staff here has been dealing with diesel buses for many years and a few hybrids, but we didn't know what to expect. And with the electric buses, it's not like you're buying your electric vehicle and you can just go plug it in anywhere. So we really wanted to dissect it and take it down and break it down to make sure that we had this roll it done correctly. Because obviously there's a lot of people for the pro electric vehicles, but there's also people that maybe are against it or have more questions. So the importance is that when we finally rolled this out, no matter how long it took, that we did it right. So the first phase obviously was understanding what we needed. So we knew that we were getting 2 electric buses. We knew we were getting 2 chargers, and we knew that we had some funds for the infrastructure. So the electric buses obviously changed, from 2018 to when we got ours in 2022. The technology was so rapid in that time that we were actually the beneficiaries of getting some better battery capacity than opposed we would have got them right in 18. Our chargers, we actually were able to get larger chargers within that time as well. The original grant called for 65 kilowatt chargers. We were able to go up to 125. And probably the biggest thing that I want to talk about is what we did with our infrastructure. So like I said, simply put, you can say I bought the bus and I bought the charger and I plug it in. But we wanted to do things differently. One, we wanted to obviously upgrade our electric grid that we currently have here at the bus barn. But we really wanted to make sure, how can we gauge the success of this program and how can we help not only just our department, but how can we help other city departments? So we partnered with Xcel Energy to reduce some of the cost that was coming in for that, but we ended up putting a separate transformer out there in a separate meter. And that's for two reasons. One, we wanted a larger transformer put in right now so that for future growth, we wouldn't have to come back in and do that extra infrastructure. So all of our conduit, our transformer, the power from the road is all capable of adding additional charging stations in the future without having to do any major construction. So that was a huge plus. Number two was we wanted it separately metered because we wanted to see truly what the effect was of how much energy and how much was the cost associated with going into those buses. So having a separate meter out there, we're able to gauge just for those two buses, as opposed to what it is to run this whole building or more so the whole island that we're on out here. So that was kind of our planning, and that obviously took some time to make sure that we got all the experts in there to make sure that we knew that we were doing, and knowing that not only were we going to be ready for the rollout, but we're also going to be ready for the growth for future buses and future fleet in the future. The other thing I want to talk about of the sustainability of the energy is, okay, good, we got the energy in there, but how can we make this more sustainable? And part of the buildings out here got solar panels, so we were looking at the option of, how can we put solar panels to help charge these buses? Well, then our wonderful utilities department came up with their new wastewater treatment facility, and right now they're in, I believe, close to the final stages of turning their facility into a process where we will actually use the burn off methane gas that they produce down there, or that we produce, to actually power not only the charging stations, but the entire island that we're on down here. So that's why we've been a really standout facility for the rest of the country, because not only are we putting electric buses into our fleet and adding more buses in the future, but we're also looking at ways to make sure that's sustainable, and how can we reduce the efficiency, and how can we reduce the impact on the environment by charging these buses. So really exciting stuff, and it's great to see the city's doing it as a whole. And if you follow the Common Council, they just approved another sustainability plan, and they actually started in 2019 with the original one. So really exciting stuff. Just in honor of time here, I'll just go into the next one real quick and save it up for questions if there is more directed towards that project. But I do have to talk about equity, because obviously that's why we're invited here today, because we're celebrating Transit Equity Week. You can list all of the major impacts that Rosa Parks had, but simply put, she really made it equitable for all. And she really opened the doors for a lot of individuals to take public transportation that maybe wouldn't before, and to create those opportunities for people that maybe less fortunate, whether it's due to income or to a disability. It really put the spotlight on how important public transportation is. And I just want to highlight a couple things that we do here at the MTU to make sure that we continue that equity for all. One thing is that we really look at our routes. How can our routes be impacted where we're getting people to things that are in need? So such as hospitals, medical appointments, just a simple fact of how can they get groceries, and then recreation, our libraries, our YMCAs, our parks. And so what we did a few years ago is we added a circulator. And what the circulator did is it took a food desert, we called it, on the south side, and it gave everybody the opportunity to get to those resources. A couple other things with our buses. All of our buses are ADA compatible, meaning that we can have mobility devices secured in our buses. So that's not going to hinder you from using public transportation if you do have to have a walker or mobility device. When I talk about, to make sure that's equitable, the MTU through different funding sources and just budget techniques, we haven't raised our rates since 2009. And I think that's something that really needs to be highlighted, that we're trying to keep this bus system affordable for people. And we are one of the lowest in the state of Wisconsin. And like I said, we haven't raised it since 2009. So that's another way to make sure that we are doing everything we can to make sure that not only people that need to ride the bus, we also want to make sure that people that want to ride the bus, we allow them that opportunity as well. So I'm right at 2:35 here, and I think that's when we're going to start taking questions. So I'll kind of open it up to Casey, if that's okay. And
sure. You bet. And just as a reminder to everyone listening today, if you've got questions, feel free to, it's certainly not too late to type them into the chat box. We will get them. So there were a couple of questions, sort of grouping them here is how they came in, but around the idea of routes. And I'm going to ask this to both of you. First of all, Adam, you sort of touched on this. How are routes determined and how are they planned? So maybe if you could go a little bit more into that. And Peter, same thing. How do they determine the routes for the Smart Bus? And a follow-up to that, are there any new routes that are planned or in the works?
Sure. So we've had most of our set routes in place for many years. If you've been in La Crosse, you know La Crosse is a very linear city, so there's hindrances just of how you can adapt routes just based upon the geographical area. We do go outside the city of La Crosse, so we do partner with Town of Campbell, La Crescent, and Alaska. Those communities decide where they want bus access to be, and we try to work the routes around them. But going back to within the city, how are routes determined? Well, one, it's public input. So I know that Peter can probably talk about our transit development plan, but that was a big thing for us to get public input. Where do you want to see these buses? A perfect example is Eagle Crest. We were able to adapt one of our routes this year to get service down to Eagle Crest, which is behind Gunderson, and they were kind of on an island down there, and we were able to get service to them. But the other thing is we really watch the trends of the city. So as the city develops, we want to make sure that public transportation is part of that. So whether it's the River Point district or I'll call it the old Kmart, right, and the new development out there, maybe possibly with our Bridgeview Plaza, we want to make sure that, as like I said, as the city grows, the city changes, that we're going to be part of those changes as well.
Yes, as far as a smart bus, originally when it was set up, we did a feasibility study, and that's where our original routes came up, and quite interesting to demonstrate how those feasibility studies are not always correct. The original routes did not have, after we went through all the studies, there was not a connect route. There's the red route, which now goes along, connects Prairie du Chien along 35 to La Crosse, was not recommended. So we began running the service without that route. And after around a year, we weren't getting ridership on where that study had told us we should go. So we kept getting input from these communities and riders said, this is, you need this is where it would be used more. And so we ultimately made the change, and that was based on ridership and public input. And that is how now, once we sort of more formally got into our routes, where the smart bus, a lot of those now, if there's, we take input from people, whether it be riders, whether it be communities thinking this might be a better spot or a better location. And then we work with we talk to our drivers, we talk to the service providers. The smart bus is contracted through Running Inc. through a contract that runs the service. So we talk to them. And then determine if we have to make any modifications. And over the years, we've had certainly tweaks with the smart buses as a new service and growing. But we're also, with the smart bus, we're limited because of as you can see, as I mentioned, they're 100 and 120 mile round trips with one bus. Just because of the cost, we just can't have multiple routes running more hourly type of service with that in the rural areas. So, unfortunately, we do our best to get it right, just to serve the most, but it's not perfect. And that because of that, we just have that one opportunity in a lot of cases for those times. We do our best, and but we do still take certainly public input. As far as other areas of service, we're always looking. We did a feasibility study a few years back about looking to the north, connecting Arcadia, then through Holman, Galesville. There was a study that we did regarding that. It just didn't show that there would be ridership at this time. That's something we could certainly look at in the future. And actually, a couple months ago, we were contacted by Mauston about their interest in connecting primarily for the TC to Toma and then La Crosse as well. And we simply asked them, we're open to looking at anything, get some, they're doing some survey work to see what there potentially would be for ridership. And ultimately, if there'd be a larger expansion like that, we'd be looking at a feasibility study once again to take a look and see if it would make sense. So that's a lot of it starts with just somebody calling up and say, hey, I think this would make sense, and then we explore it from there.
So Peter, I'm going to stick with you. There's a question about the potential for routes on Saturdays or weekend routes with the smart bus. What's the story there? Because right now I think they just run.
Yeah, it's Monday,
correct? Yeah,
it's Monday through Friday, and we are hearing that, and that's something we're looking at. I will have to say it's always been one of those things that we've talked about that have the ability for a Saturday service. It comes down to the dollars and cents of it, as I showed you the chart and the funding, just what, another day costs. It's more local match. It's those things it's things that we look at. Do we maybe reduce some of the service weekdays to then accommodate some Saturday service? That's a possibility. The other service that we've always talked about and heard about too is a later evening connection. So if we had a bus, right now we're hitting the times, 7:30 in the morning, people going to work, and 4:30 leaving. Ultimately, if you have a bus making a trip 11, it's that second shift, you possibly can consider, you then potentially have 3 shifts that you serve. So, those are things we look at as well. But a lot of it just comes down to dollars and cents. And for us, a lot of times it means sacrificing, look at some of our existing routes, and obviously any way you take away service, that becomes an issue as well. So it's a juggling act, that's for sure.
Sure, I bet.
Try to do our best.
Adam, a couple of questions here. So 2 unrelated ones, but they're both directed about the MTU here. So first of all, how the electric bus has been handling in the extreme cold weather? Any issues that you're seeing?
Yeah, it's a great question, and obviously we're monitoring that very closely. This week has been a great example. So, right now we're getting about 150 miles on our buses, and we've seen a reduction of about 20 to 30 miles with this really cold weather. Remember, this is our first winter, so we really don't have a gauge to go off of, and we're still working with some of the battery logistics with our Proterra, our partner right now. But does the cold weather have an effect on it? Absolutely. The cold weather does, and also the terrain that it's driving on. So, luckily in La Crosse, we're pretty flat here, but if we were to go up and down hills, that has a draw on the battery. But like I said earlier, we were beneficiaries because we actually waited a little bit, so we had better technology in the batteries. And one unique thing that we did in La Crosse, we chose not to purchase our batteries. We actually leased the batteries. And the reason why we did that is if anybody has a cell phone and knows that after a couple of years, that battery starts to go down. Well, once we have a full warranty throughout the 12 years that we have this lease agreement, but also in 6 years, we get a full swap out of our batteries. So to the original question, has a cold affected them? Yes, but I actually see that as only going to get better in the future because of the technology that we're going to continue to advance by the way we purchase these buses.
Got it. That's good news that it really seems to extend the life then. I know that's a fear of a lot of people with electric vehicles, right? Is the battery, how long does that actually last?
Yep. But I mean, you'll see them out there. Those electric buses have been out there all week. So they're out there again today. So that's, like I said, a positive thing is to see those buses continuing to operate in conditions like this.
Sure. Does that take for your drivers to be able to operate those buses? Is there a lot of training that happens?
Yeah, there is separate training that goes with that, and part of it is just because of the regeneration of the battery. But yeah, all the drivers went through a course. Our trainers went through a course with Proterra. But I mean, for the most part, they're driving a bus. They have the same qualifications with that CDL and passenger endorsement. But yeah, they're special mainly with the braking and the starting.
Question about funding here for the MTU. So I know you mentioned in your presentation the percentage of the budget that's actually covered by rider fees. And I can't remember what that was, but the question is around city tax dollars. How much city tax dollars, not finding or pass through from the state or federal funds, but how much city dollars actually spent on the MTU? Do you have that information?
Yeah, so the city subsidy is right around $745,000 a year. So if you break that up with the 52,000 residents of La Crosse, there's your number. But yeah, it's $745,000. I might be close, might be a couple of $100 after that, but that's the main number. And yeah, so then there's other fund sources. Obviously, we get the federal and state allocations, but we also do with our agreements with our partners. So I mentioned La Crescent, Town of Campbell, and Onalaska. But we also have agreements with our universities such as TC or WTC, UWL, and with Viterbo as well. So those try to offset the costs.
Got it. Question for both of you. If you had a magic wand, what would you like to see changed or added to make Smart Bus or the MTU even better? Peter, let's start with you.
Well, the easy answer is funding. Certainly. yeah, just the ability to provide more service would be valuable. And like I said, we look forward certainly to the our electric buses. Hopefully I'll be saying that after we receive them and run them for a while in our terrain and weather. But that will provide us, I think, be environmentally friendly, and also it, I think our operating costs as well, just because of the wear and tear of buses. I think there's a longer lifespan, things of that nature, and that's always a challenge with buses.
So do I only get one wish or do I get multiple? You said.
Just one wish for now.
Yeah. No, so Peter touched on the funding. Obviously, funding is important. I mean, if you watch just from a federal level to a state level, it seems like it goes in different waves, and sometimes money gets there, but you have to look at the history of the money, and there might have been 10 years where there was no funding, so you have to be really critical on how you're spending the money now, because you're not sure of how the money is going to come later on. And Peter can contest, a lot of our programs are competitive grants. So when people say that we're funded by the federal or state, that does not mean it's guaranteed every year. Those are competitive grants that we apply for every year to get those funds back in. But yeah, funds are a lot. But what I wanted to shift to, and I talked to some people this morning, it's also talking with different groups, it's got to be the commitment. The commitment to using transportation, the commitment for sustainability. So, Peter mentioned about the third shift, right? Or extending the hours, and we've looked at that. We have areas in this community, such as the downtown area, but also our industrial park, and we think those are highlighted points that we really like to get to. But in order for these routes to be sustainable, they have to have commitment. So, without getting too long because of the time here, but I'll talk about transportation culture. You have some large metropolitan areas that have a transportation culture. That means that people that are using it is because they have to, but they also want to do that. And that's what we're trying to bring here to La Crosse, that, it's great that if we want to hit every single park, we want to hit every single business, we want to increase our service, we want to increase the times of our service. And funding, like Peter said, is a major portion that you have to be able to fund the buses, fund the employees, but you also have to have that commitment. So it's two parts. So whether that's communities making the decisions to, I don't want to say make it more difficult to drive a vehicle, but are we taking away the option to use public transportation? So to sum it all up is commitment and culture of transportation, along with Peter's funding. Maybe it was more than one wish, but they all tied in together, right?
Yeah, sure, of course. How can people, it sort of gets at a question that I had in my head, is how can people on this call best help support your work?
As far as I'm concerned, talk to public officials, let people know that nothing works better than when our riders or people talk to our any of these communities served by the Smart Bus, talk to their elected officials, find just what one person saying, hey, it's a great service does. When my job when the service really started, remember that listening to all those communities, my job was to go out and get funding for the service. At that time didn't exist. It was just a thought. And that was a challenge, but we were able to get it accomplished for people to donate and provide funding for something that we weren't sure how it was going to go. But the interesting thing is that since COVID in the last year, Charlie Handy's now is in charge of planners, doing a great job with Smart. We went out and met with all these communities again, just to sort of reintroduce ourselves after the time. And it was just great. We really didn't have a bad experience. It was they knew the service, thought it was important, and we're more than willing. I mean, we added to more commitments as far as our contributions. So, and that's because people have heard about it. They recognize it. They hear from people. It's a good thing. It's important to their community. So anything, just getting the word out and having people just jump on, try the service. I know it's not for everyone. No, we don't expect everyone to ride, but just give it a try. And it is for some people. And it's just important to be able to have a transport, to provide the opportunity or the transportation service, whether if everybody uses it or not, it's still part of our transportation system.
Yeah, and kind of just to go off what Peter ended with there is use the service, and not only use the service, but bring a friend, get more people to have the knowledge of it. Obviously, to talk to different officials and tell your story, those are great, and we need to continue that. But we need to get the message out to more than the people that are always concerned, if that makes sense. We need to spread the word to spread it to more people. And the best way to do that is to have them, bring them on the bus, take them for a ride. You're gonna go to the farmer's market on Saturday, right? Well, let's try taking the bus today. If you have a parent teachers conference, try taking the bus today. If you're gonna head down to that big thing we call Oktoberfest, right? I think we all know what that is. Take the bus today. We're not trying to eliminate you not getting behind the wheel. We're not out there saying go sell your car, but we're trying to make you think differently. And if you can just get on the bus and take somebody that has never been on the bus before, I think that really is a message that we're trying to get across, that to let them share this experience that the people on this call, I think, obviously know what it is and know how important it is.
That would be a great place to end it, but I've got two burning questions that are coming in that I really want to make sure that that we voice. So, and they're both around use and sort of advocacy. So one of them is, do the shared ride services have vehicles that are capable of transporting wheelchair-bound passengers? And also, so this is directly directed towards you, Peter. How exactly does one book a shared ride?
Yes, essentially there's a number wherever these services are in those communities. There's a number to call and reserve, and you want to indicate there if a wheelchair is required or some accessibility issues are required, to let them know. Because in most of them they have the minivans that are fit a wheelchair in. But however, I know in some of these communities they do have has some electric vehicles that are just small for passengers that are do not require that type of service. But what you do is just there's a number. If you go to these communities' website, you can find the number for the transportation service, and you just call and make a reservation for ride. It's really that simple.
Great. And finally, I'm amazed at how the coverage that there is with both Smart Bus and with the MTU. I mean, there's a lot of areas that are covered, but for those areas that aren't, that don't have access to service, how can people advocate for service where maybe they don't have any right now? Is there a particular process that they should follow?
For us, we obviously just did the transportation development plan that had a lot of public input, but we're always open, and it's a simple call or an email to the MTU. And especially, like I said, Eagle Crest is a good example. They reached out to us a few years ago, then things changed. They reached back out to us again. We were able to actually bring a bus down there, talking about what their needs were. So you got to remember, every route is a domino effect. So to make one change to a route is going to affect the rest of the route. But that doesn't mean that we're not here to change routes, but we have to have that information. So as I kind of go off there a little bit, simply just contact us. We can't make every change, but if we don't know they're out there, we don't know that we need to make those changes. And then the second thing is that I talked about is with the new developments, that's really important as well. So we're monitoring that. If there's a new business that came up, if there's new housing development that came up, if there's a new resource center for somebody that came up, we're monitoring that as well to try to get ahead of it. And that's working with our planning department to make sure that if there is something that's going to happen, that we can hopefully get ahead of it and have a plan in place for that new route before the place opens up.
And with regard to the Smart Bus, I sort of mentioned before, it's different communities have come to us from time to time and asked, and I always say, we'll certainly take it under consideration. Like I mentioned, Mauston right now is looking at things. We just asked for some additional information. For the time, in the past, we provide service to Cashton, we provide service to Lafarge for different times and different periods. And sometimes they worked out, sometimes they don't. So yeah, I mean, we're willing to take a look at things, and if communities are willing, and also when we look at adding whatever that added local match is to get us leverage that additional funding, if that's available, that can certainly help as far as implementing things. But again, it's always it's just coming and asking, and we always take a look at things.
Great. Peter and Adam, thank you so much for your time. We're bumping up here against the bottom of the hour, and we just have a couple more things we want to share with you. So again, Peter and Adam, thank you for the time and the important work you're doing with transit in our area. It's it really is an equity issue. It really is a climate issue. And all the work we can do in those areas are vital. So thank you for the work that you've done. I do want to make everyone aware of Transit Equity Days that's happening right now in La Crosse, January 30th through February 4th. I'll leave the screen up for a little bit. If you've got a phone handy or something, you can quick get a snap of that QR code, which will take you to a webpage that has a list of all the activities going on this week for Transit Equity Days in the La Crosse area. You can also check out that website, tinyurl.com/LAXTED 2023. But there are a week full of events, really shining a light on transit, public transit, and why it's important for all sorts of reasons. There's also a poll that's going to be coming out here in just a sec that Carrie's going to release, just asking how you felt about this program. This is information that we'll take into consideration here at the Sustainability Institute. So it helps us plan for our programming and some directions to take in the future. So again, maybe 2 questions or so. If you could take a few seconds to answer that. And as you're doing that, if you liked our programming today, please do consider becoming a member of the Sustainability Institute. You can find us at sustaininstitute.com. Becoming a member or donating is really easy. There's a green button and a blue button right on top of our homepage. Click on those and you can donate or become a member at a level that feels good to you and is comfortable to you. We really do rely on our memberships to keep programming like this free to the public. So please, if you like what we do, please do consider becoming a member. I'd like to thank our promoter, champion, and advocate members, Wade Hackbarth, Glenn Jenkins, Jacob Siamas, Raj Schnick, Dorothy Leonard, Strive to Thrive, Habitat for Humanity, and in particular, Lynn and Todd Huffman and Lee Rosh. And finally, do join us for our upcoming events. You can find those at sustaininstitute.com, upcoming events. Our next sustainability chat is going to be on March 28th at 2 p.m. We're going to be talking about a really hot topic right now, pun totally intended, residential heat pumps. This will be featuring Trane Technologies. Heat pumps are sort of the wave of the future as far as how we are going to be heating our homes, even here in cold weather climates. So I think that's going to be a really interesting topic to learn about. We also later on in the spring will be doing, of course, our Green Goose Chase in April. We'll have the help host the Earth Fair in late April. So join us. Check out our website. You can learn more about those events. You can register for the sustainability chat there as well. But please do join us. We'd love to have you. And with that, thank you everyone for joining us and hope to see you in March.